So, hello everybody. We are going to be doing some user interface stuff in Unity today. If you don't know what a user interface is, to be honest, I'm a little surprised. But basically, Unity has a built-in UI system, and this entails a lot of different features. Most importantly, being able to draw stuff on the camera layer, if you will. So this is just stuff that can be attached to the camera at all times. And it's really useful for health bars, inventory systems. I'm sure you're all familiar with it if you've played any video game before. But a lot of the features that it has built in have to do with having like text, images. They have some other things like sliders. I think they have a drop down. Some other things that are built in. Those things are a little more complicated to do by yourself, which is why it's really nice. Like buttons. So we will dive into that today. So first thing, assuming you have Unity installed, we will move on past that. I'll have you head to our student organization page, which is www.stuorg.iastate.edu/ISU-GGC. You can also just search like Game Development Club Iowa State and it will probably pop up. But once you're on this page, head on to the Downloads tab. That is where you will see the Unity UI Workshop package. So this is just a folder with a bunch of stuff. I'm basically providing you everything but some of the stuff from the scenes that will, like the UI stuff that we'll be adding. So I already, there's some scripts in there that do some basic things, which I will explain, but I'm not going to have you write for the sake of time. And then there's also some bare bone textures, sound effects, some other stuff. So just enough to make a sample project. But yeah, if you click on that, it'll download. I guess I should have done that before. Yeah, I'll lead you to this page, hit download. Do not need to log in. It should just go. And after you have done that, you should right-click on it and extract or unzip it, whichever it's called for you. And that'll give us the actual folder. Okay. Why are you like this? Okay, and then next, we are going to open Unity Hub. My mouse is tweaking. Is everybody good so far? Did anybody that came in late need me to wait?
I extracted it correctly.
I think you're good then. That's pretty much where I'm at. So
It just says assets.
yeah, that's fine. So I think I did that part right. Yeah, it should be assets, and then inside of that assets folder, there's a bunch of stuff. So that's okay. So inside of the Unity Hub, we will create a new project. This will be a 2D game. So if you want to go ahead and click on that 2D option, and then you can name it whatever you'd like. I'm going to name it GDC UI Workshop. And then I will hit Create Project. Okay. Okay, so after your project has loaded, I just deleted the scenes folder that they had in there by default, because what we're importing already has some stuff. So if you want to open that folder you extracted, inside of here there's an assets folder, and then I'm going to just take all of the stuff inside of here Control A, and then that'll select everything, and I'm just going to drag it and drop it into this bottom project window. My trackpad is also bad. It also has problems.
Did you just get a new laptop or is that the old one?
This one was used from my cousin, but it's not his fault. It was the hardware with the actual laptop has problems. Because I looked it up and people on Reddit have had the same issue. Okay, well, now that that has been dragged in there, now we have all the stuff. And then I will go to the scenes folder and double click on main menu. You'll see this pop up. It'll say scenes have been moved if you deleted the scenes folder that was already in here. In this case, we don't care about it. That's just the empty one, so we can hit don't save. And now we have a basic scene. So if we want to see what's going on inside of here, we can click on Canvas over in the main menu. And then if you hover over the scene view, you can hit F, and that'll just kind of zoom out to see the whole thing. So this is just a basic main menu that I tossed together for this, which already has some UI components in it. I figured things like the text and buttons are pretty straightforward, and I figured you guys would probably be able to figure out that stuff on your own if you really wanted to. But the other things that I wanted to touch on had to do with creating an audio slider. That's something that's a little tricky because of just like the code behind it, which I will explain, but I'm also just going to show how to do it. And then also we'll create a hit points bar as well as a pause menu and a pretty dirty, easy way to be able to pause a game. Ideally, you would do it probably differently, but for the sake of simplicity, if you're doing like a game jam, doing something as simple as pausing the time within the game, A-okay. So, yeah. Now that we have our project open, let's import something called TextMesh Pro. Basically what this is, so Unity by default has some text components and stuff built in, but if you make it big at all, it looks awful because it's all like pixelated and stuff. But they have a other thing that they have built in called TextMesh Pro, TMP, which looks way better, and I would highly recommend always using it. So if you hit Window on this top bar and then go down, you'll see TextMesh Pro, and then that'll pop out, and we want to hit Import TMP Essential Resources. And then this will pop up a Import Unity Package window. This might have been already included with the, oh, it was included. So this was already included with the thing I had to extract, but normally if it wasn't already in here, this is what you would have to do. And then in this case, you would hit like import and it would import everything. That's already been done, so don't worry about it. But if you want to use this stuff, you will need to do that before you do anything else. Okay, well that simplifies one thing. Okay, so just a general rundown of what the project looks like right now is it's two scenes. We have a main menu. We're going to add the audio sliders in the main menu because I'm lazy. And then if you hit start, oops, we actually got to do one thing first that did not save. So what the start button does is it just tells Unity to load the second scene in the list of scenes. But right now that list isn't complete. It doesn't have anything in there. So if we want that to work to be able to go from main menu to game and vice versa, we'll have to add that. And I'll actually show the code as well after we do this, just so you kind of see what's going on. So let's go to File and then Build Settings. And that'll open this menu here. And you can see up here it says Scenes in Build, and it just shows the main menu. So by default, it always adds at least one scene, because you can't really have a game without a scene. And so we want to also add the game scene. The only way to do that I really know of is to open it and then hit Add Open Scenes. So if you, down here in the project window, if you go to the folder, the scenes folder, you should see game and main menu. If you double click game, we will open it. And now just to verify, you can see that says game up here, so we know it's open in the hierarchy window. Then you can go ahead and click add open scene back in this build settings, and now you will see the two of them listed there. And if you see on the right side, it has a 0 and a 1. This is just the index, like what number is it. There's two ways of loading scenes in Unity. You can either load them by name or you can load them by index. Doesn't really matter which one you use. Sometimes name is easier in case you organize this list or something, but doesn't matter. So let's close that. And I will show you this code. You don't have to open this on your own device, but for the sake of teaching. There's a lot of stuff going on in here, so just focus on this part for now. The start game function. So after the button is clicked, it will call this function, and this just tells the Unity engine, the scene manager, that we want to load the scene number 1, which is the game scene. So if we wanted to load the main menu, we could put in 0. Alternatively, I think we can also do game. So if we wanted to load it by the name, we could just type in the name there, and then that would load the game, as long as it's in our build settings where I just talked about. Okay, and then in the, I'm going to go back to the main menu scene. And then if you haven't used like a button before, it's pretty simple. I'll show you how to create stuff later, but they have like an on-click function, and you can add an object to it right here, and then you should be able to do all this stuff, which I will explain in a bit. So let's actually just do that. Yeah, you'll see all this stuff in here. That's all fine and dandy. So with the UI, everything in the UI in Unity is inside of a canvas object, which I already left one in here. I should have probably deleted this too, but it's fine. The canvas is basically just a giant item that covers your camera in front of it, and you put all the UI stuff on here. This has some tools built into it to be able to allow you to change certain things, most of which you probably won't mess with. The one that, or there's two that I mess with often. The canvas itself, you can change how it's rendered in space. So say that you want a canvas, like a UI system that isn't directly tied to the camera, you could set it to world space. And then it's like you can move the camera away from it, and it will be an actual object in world space. Whereas most of the time when it's set to screen space overlay, which is the default, like it's always going to be on the camera. Wherever you turn or look, it doesn't matter. So that's something you might want to mess with. Other than that, UI scale mode is the other one. The default is constant pixel size. So that means that every person that plays the game, if they have a different resolution, the UI and stuff will not scale. So if I have an HD monitor and it looks fine for me, and then my friend goes and plays it and he has like a 2 HD monitor, like a double one, or maybe one that has a weird aspect ratio, it's really long and rectangular, it's going to look a lot different for him than it is for me. Which is fine. You just have to account for that when you're designing things. You can also set it to scale with screen size, so that'll do kind of what it says. If somebody has a bigger or smaller screen, it will just shrink or grow everything accordingly, which is usually what I do, but sometimes you don't want that. So, and then there's also constant physical size, and what I believe is that doesn't scale at all. With the constant pixel size, like if it's wider, it'll just like push the buttons to the side and they'll still be the same size, but I think constant physical size means it won't even do that. It'll just stay there in the middle. So let's actually create a pause menu. So usually how you create every UI element is after you, in the hierarchy, you can right click and you can do UI, and then you will do canvas, and that's how you usually start everything. We already have a canvas, so you don't necessarily need to do that. But I'm going to right-click on the canvas, and then we'll do UI, and you can see all these different options. For a pause menu, you can usually either do like a picture, like an image in the background. I'm going to do a panel, and there's not really any difference, except for a panel has like a default semi-transparent. So if you're just whipping something up, this is pretty nice. It also, you can see how it stretches to fill everything. But we don't want the whole pause menu to cover the entire screen. So if you see over on the right, there's this rect transform. This is a little different than normal. So if you're familiar with the Unity architecture, as every game object has a transform, and this controls the position, the scale, and the rotation of objects. A rect transform is a little different. It has those same things, scale, position, and rotation, but, or does it have rotation? Yeah, it does. But you also have another option to be able to set anchor and pivot points. And basically this allows for some different size mechanics. So if you click on this box here where it says stretch, stretch, you can see this grid of different things that pop up. And I'll kind of explain what they do. It's a little hard. I mean, it's easier to visualize it. Basically, all of them in the middle, they will set a point, and that represents the center of where this is in reference to its size or to its position. And then the blue ones with the arrows, that means it's going to stretch. So it's going to be relative to the ends as opposed to a point. So I'll kind of show you that here. Yeah, so you can see the position change in the top, in the background, in the rect transform. Like if I set it up here, the pivot point is now in the top left, and you can kind of see it. It's denoted by this like little, not the blue dot, but the thing behind it, the like cross. So that shows you where the pivot is. In that we can change around. So if we wanted something to be always tied to the top left corner, like a pause button or something, we can tell it to pivot to that corner. And then when the screen changes sizes for different players, different people with different monitors, it will automatically like always stay in that corner. Whereas if we wanted like a hotbar to be in the bottom center, we would want to tell it to pivot into the center, because then if the screen changes sizes, it'll always center. We're not going to have something accidentally, go to the left side when we want it to be in the middle, regardless of the screen size. And then the stretching is a little different. So this is relative to the sides. So if you look at the background, like if I have this pivoted in the middle, it says position X, position Y, width and height, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's the position and then the width and the size. But if you change it to a stretch mode, the height, like in this case, it gets replaced by top and bottom. So this is how many pixels away it is from the top or the bottom. So if I change this to 200, you'll see that it goes down. Whereas if I change the position X to like 100, it shifts everything over. So this is something just to mess around with. I hope my explanation was sufficient. If anybody has any questions, also just shout them out too. So without further ado, I'm going to leave this on the stretch on both directions. And then let's just change all of these to, what's a good size? Ooh. I think I'll change them all to like, we'll do 400 on the sides and then 200 on the top and bottom. And this just gives us like a little rectangle in the middle. Obviously, you'd probably make this look a little nicer if you were making a game. But let's just do this. So this will always stretch, so it's always going to have that margin on the outside. So if the screen were to get bigger or smaller, this would scale with it. But usually pause menus don't do that, so I'm actually going to just change that to this center button here, center middle. So now it'll pivot to the center. So now if the screen does change size, instead of the margins being constant, now it's the actual size of the box being constant. So that will not grow or shrink. It will just be in the center always. So, yeah. Okay, so let's add some components to it so we can actually tell that it's a pause menu. I'm going to right-click on the panel. Actually, first I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to click on it. You can just click on it and like hover there. Sometimes it'll pop up, let you rename it. If you have trouble with that, you can click on it in the hierarchy, and then on the right top in the inspector, there should be a way to rename it. You just click on it there. I'm just going to call it like pause menu. And then I'm going to right-click on it in the hierarchy and go to UI, and then let's make a text. And you'll see it says Text Mesh Pro next to it, so that's how you know that you're using the better version of text. And you can name that if you'd like. So this has a bunch of features built into it. I'm not going to mess with all of them, but you can see you can change the font, you can bold, italicize, underline, etc. You can change the size, you can center it differently. Whatever your heart desires, it's probably built in. You can change the color. So, but most of the time, for something simple like this that's static, we don't need to mess with that. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we want to have our text in the top middle, just so it just says like paused or whatever, and it looks nice. So in order to change the text in the inspector, you can see where it says new text. Go ahead and just click on that, and then let's just put like paused. And then let's move it to the top as well. So for this pivot, I'm going to move it to the top center, like that. And then if you were to change this position Y to 0, or I guess this is the anchor technically. I kept saying pivot, it's the anchor. Yeah, that's different. So the anchor, sorry, is what position it is like on the canvas. The pivot is its center within itself. So in this case, I'm going to show you something and then explain it. So I'm going to change this pivot to 1, and then you'll see that this value changed, the position Y. So you can still kind of see that like cross shape in the middle, and then the blue dot, there's now a blue dot up here in the middle. So that's the center point of the UI element itself, like the text. And then the cross is the anchor point on the canvas. So by default, like if you set the position to 0, those will always be in the same spot. And this is really nice for just lining stuff up like this. So now if we set the pivot, so we say, hey, we want this pivot in the top middle of this text, and then we also want the position of this in the top middle of the pause menu, then we can just set those both, set the position to 0, and it will be there nice for us. So, okay. Let's change this size to bigger. I'm just going to make it like 700 or something. I'm going to set the height to set it to 100. And then I also want the text centered, so if I'm going to scroll down in the alignment area, there's also this one. And then if you want your text to automatically size, there is a button for that. Auto size, go ahead and click that. It'll make it bigger. If you want to change the max size, make it like some large value, it'll always scale to fill the rectangle that you have set it to based on the width and height. So we've got that. Okay. So now let's add a couple buttons. Normally, for something as simple as this, you can just add a button, maybe add like a few buttons and just manually lay them out, which is probably what I would recommend. However, I decided to make this a little more complicated just to show you some other features that Unity has. So we're actually going to create a vertical layout group. So there's 3 different types that Unity has. You have a vertical layout group, a horizontal layout group, and a grid layout group. And basically what these do is whatever children they have, they will automatically put them in a row, either vertically, horizontally, or whatever. And this is really useful, especially for like an inventory system. If you have a grid, it'll automatically put all those. Or in this case, we have a list of buttons. Like if we are adding and removing buttons, we don't want to manually have to write all the code for that. If we just add them to this layout group, it'll automatically place them wherever we like. But for, like I said, for a pause menu, normally you would have something dynamic. But we'll just do it anyways. So let's go ahead and right-click on pause menu over in the hierarchy. And this isn't actually built into here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create an empty object. And I'll just call this like a layout group or something. So the layout group will always try to put the children inside of its rectangle bounds. So we want this to be a little bit bigger. We want to have it cover the space of where we want the buttons to be when they're in a list. So I'm going to change this to this anchor preset down here. So it stretches in between the top and the bottom, but it has a fixed width. The width, I'm going to set to, what I have, that 700, which is the same as the text. And then the top and bottom, the bottom we can go ahead and set to 0 because there's nothing down there. But for the top, we don't want it to overlap with the text, so we're actually going to set that to 100, which is the size of the text. So now the buttons will not overlap that text. They will become flush with each other. So we have that layout group. We have to actually make it a layout group. So in the inspector, you can go ahead and hit Add Component, and we will type in Vertical Layout Group. And that'll automatically add that in here. Most of this is fine. It has a few settings that you can change that all do different things. Control child size basically just means that the vertical layout group will automatically scale its children. So if you put a button in there and the button is only like 50 pixels wide, but the layout is wider than that, we want it to scale automatically so we don't have to manually change the button size. We can go ahead and like check the width box, which we are actually going to do. So go ahead and check that. Everything else is fine. You kind of have to mess around with it if you want to actually see what I mean. Words can only do so much justice. So let's keep moving on. So I'm going to right click on the layout group, and I am going to add a button to it. So we'll right click on it, go to UI, and then hit button, Text Mesh Pro. So you see that it spread all the way across, or automatically scaled to the width of this box, which is nice. I'm just going to call this resume button. Yeah, and then it's a little small for me, so I'm going to change the height of this button to, not that big. We'll just do 100. This will look kind of gnarly, but that's okay. Yeah, and then we also want to change the text of the button. So the way that this works is Unity just basically has an image and then has some text over it. The text is a child, so if you want to actually change the text of the button, you'll have to hit this little drop down, click on the text component, and then change the text of that. So if we want this to say resume, we will have to change it here. And I'm also going to check the auto size just so it automatically scales up so it looks nice and big and readable. So after we've done that, that is good enough. So let's add 2 more buttons just so we can have some different variability here. The easiest way, in my opinion, to duplicate this, I think you can control copy and paste, or you can just hit Control D when you're selecting the button, and that'll just duplicate it. And you can see that it automatically puts them nicely in a list. This is what the vertical layout group does. So if I just kept like making more and more of them, you'll see that at this point it's full, so it just adds them to the bottom. But as long as they're spaced, it'll evenly space them out. If you wanted them to not be spaced out, that's where some of these settings come into play. Yeah, if you uncheck this child force expand, then they won't be spread out. It'll just automatically be in a list. So yeah, there's lots of stuff you can do with that. We don't want these all to be resumed though, so let's change the middle one so it says, I'm gonna rename it actually. This one will be restart. Restart button. Now I gotta change the text as well. Restart. And then I'm gonna change the bottom one. This will be the exit button. And I'll also change the text to exit. And they will do those appropriate actions soon enough. Okay, so now we're going to add the pause menu script, which I have already written. It has some functionality in it. Basically, it just has a function for each one of these buttons, and we will assign those to the script so you can actually see them in action. So let's select the pause menu object, and then over in the inspector, just like the vertical layout group, we're going to add a pause menu script. You can see there's like no settings at all, which is fine, because all it's doing is having some functions that we need to call. But if we want to use this, actually tell our buttons to call these functions that are on this script. We'll set that up, which I kind of hinted at earlier. So go ahead and click on the resume button. Make sure you click on the button and not the text part of it. And then scroll down. You'll see this area that's under the button section that says on click. So this is a Unity event. And an event is something that is called when something happens. So in this case, Unity's doing all the work, the hard work in the background to be able to determine when a button has been clicked, like when the mouse is over it and the mouse clicks it down and releases it. After all that has happened, this event is triggered. So any functions that are tied to it will be called automatically, which is really nice. So you're not constantly checking, is this button, do all these things match up? You just have to set this function, easy peasy. So go ahead and click on the plus, and that'll create this little thing here. Don't worry about the runtime only, but where it says none object, that is where we want to drag and drop the pause menu into, the thing that we added the script to. Because once you do that, then on the right side it'll say no function. You can go ahead and click on this. It'll have a drop down and go to the pause menu. And then you'll see all these things that pop up. Most of these are Unity just part of the defaults. Like cancel invoke, that's just part of the object by default, or the class by default. So you can ignore most of them. But you'll see one that says toggle pause at the bottom. So if you go ahead and click on that, now when the button has been clicked, it will call the toggle pause button, and it will, what that function does is if it's paused, it'll unpause, and if it's unpaused, it'll pause. So, and then let's do that same exact thing with each of the other buttons. Click on the restart button, add a click event, drag that object down in there, the pause menu, and then go to pause menu and restart. And then one more time at the exit button. Click on that, click on plus, drag the pause menu, change the function to exit. Okay, and then one last thing that we will do, if everybody got that.
You wrote those methods, right? They're not built in.
Yeah, I wrote those, so I'll actually just show them quick so you can see them. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is, you can go ahead and look through all of them. I kind of commented them. If anybody has any questions, so you can just ask in the Discord. But the pause menu script, so here's what the toggle pause one is doing. The easiest way to pause a game in Unity, I say easiest. This doesn't work in every situation. The easiest way, Unity has a time system built into it, and you can change the scale of time. So if you wanted everything in the game to go faster, you could make it like 2.0, and then everything would move faster. Or if you wanted to do like a slow motion effect for everything in the game, you would set it to 0.5, and then everything just moves slower. It's really nice. But if you set it to 0, nothing will move. And this is great because it stops all physics. It stops any animations, literally everything except for sound. So if you have music playing, it won't pause that. But it stops everything else. So if we just set this to 0, it will pause the game. And then we also have this in here, which just shows the pause menu. So things will still render on the screen. They'll still update and stuff when it comes to rendering, but it just won't move. And then to unpause, we just set the time scale back to 1, so it moves at normal pace. And then we will deactivate the pause menu. The restart button, we'll have it resume, because it's in order to click the restart button, it will be paused in the first place. And then we will use that scene manager again to load scene 1, which is the game scene. So basically just reloads the same scene. And then exit, same exact thing, except for this time we're going to load the main menu, which is 0. So those are pretty straightforward. If we want to test this, first let's go ahead and click on the pause menu and then uncheck this box next to the name. This will deactivate the game object, so it just won't render it. Because by default, you don't want the pause menu to show. This is something that I have another script in here. So put in the player script, I think. Yeah, in the player script, I just set it so like if you hit the escape key, it will toggle the pause menu. Which, speaking of, we need to assign that reference. One more step, I promise. Okay, so if you go ahead and click on the player object towards the bottom where the player script is, you'll see how it says pause menu and it says none pause menu. We'll go ahead and just drag our pause menu into that box. Oh crap, okay. Oh, it hates me. My mouse. Okay, option B. I'm just going to click on this little doohickey and then hit pause menu. Okay, so we'll assign the pause menu into there. You can just drag and drop that. It's a lot easier. So now, when the escape is pressed, the player script will tell it to pause. So if we go ahead and hit play, you can kind of see this in action. Say that you do something like this for your pausing, that's fine. But you may run into the problem of, say you have an animation that's running and you want it to keep playing. You might have to do a little bit of research, but Unity has something called unscaled time. So it's the same thing as normal time, but it just isn't multiplied by that time scale that we changed. So the animator has a built-in way to use unscaled time instead of scaled time. By default, it uses scaled time, so if you do this, it'll pause it properly. But if you wanted it to never be paused, you could set the animator to unscaled time, and then it will keep going. And the only situation where I've had to use something like this is I had like a crafting system that I made, and then it would show an animation that would show it like moving across the inventory into a slot. Obviously, the game's paused when you open the inventory, so I wanted it to still play that animation, so I had to set that to unscaled time. So something like that. Okay, let's do part 2. Let's go ahead and move to the main menu scene. So if you want to go to the scenes in the bottom and hit main menu. Now we're going to do an audio system. So this is a little less UI, but it kind of has to do with it because usually you do them at the same time. we will be creating an audio mixer. So what an audio mixer does in general is it allows you to modify different properties of audio. So you can change the volume, which is the most important thing. You can also change the pitch, so like how high or low sounding it is. Maybe add some reverb, some echo. You can do a lot of different things. When it comes to like music or something, usually you would do stuff like that in the actual music editor. But with with sound effects, sometimes you want to do that in the game because it could be dependent on if you're in a cave or not, and you can't like, and you could just have two different sound files, but maybe you don't need that. But we don't care about that stuff. We're just going to add a volume slider just to show you how to do it. If you want to mess with this stuff in the future, that would be awesome. So you can do that. So let's open the audio folder, and you can see the jump and music sounds that are in here. That's great. I'm going to right click and go to create. And then, where's it at? Right kind of in the middle, slightly above the middle, there is an audio mixer. I'm going to click on that one. And I'm just going to call this mixer. So that'll create a new audio mixer for us. And then to open this, just go ahead and double click on it, and you'll see this menu pop up. Oh, now it's bigger. Okay. Hopefully you can see that, because I don't know how to make it bigger. But so the best way to make sound from a design standpoint is to have probably about 3 sliders. Typically, it can be different per game, but usually you have a master volume, which controls the volume for everything, and then you have a bunch of other different ones. Usually it can be split into like music and sound effects, or you can do more. Like Minecraft, for example, has like hostile mobs, peaceful mobs, block sounds, like all these different categories, and then you have different sliders for each of them. And the way that Unity has it set up is you can create groups and you can create subgroups. So the master volume would be like the highest level group, and then below that you can have subgroups. So when you change the master volume, it will automatically lower the volume for other things, and then the music and sound would still be independent from each other. So by default it has the master volume in here. On the left you can see where it says groups. We're going to hit the plus. After selecting master, you hit plus, and then I'm going to name this music. And I'm going to follow that same process. Make sure you click on master so it uses that as the top level group. Hit plus again. You'll see that it should be next to music. We'll call this one sound. If you had music selected, you'll see that it shows up like this, where it's kind of indented. You don't want that, because then if you change the music sound, it will also change the sound, or the sound effect sound. So let's just put that back how it was, just like this. And this is great. Like if you wanted to, you could just manually change this. And this changes the volume. You can see it also here as well. By default, we want it set to 0. Yeah. And you can change the pitch. You can also add other effects. So this is what I was talking about with like the echo and some other stuff. But we just care about the volume. So in order to actually change this with the code, we have to expose the parameters so we can use them in the C# scripts. The way that we do that is by, I'm going to select master in the groups, and then in the inspector over here, if you right click on the word volume, you'll see a bunch of stuff pop up, and the top one is expose volume of master to script. Go ahead and click on that. And then now you'll see a little arrow. That's good. You'll also see down here in expose parameters, it has it listed. It says my exposed param. We'll rename that soon. But let's expose the other ones as well. We'll expose music and sound so we can control all 3 of them. Same process. Click on the group, right click on volume, hit expose. You could also expose like the pitch if you want to use that. Obviously if you don't need to, don't have to. So we're just going to do the volume, expose. Now they're all exposed. And then we're going to rename these. So if you wanted to use them in the code right now, you would have to reference them by my expose param, my expose param 1, just so it looks easy on the eyes, and so it works with the scripts that I wrote. We're going to name it the first one, master. So the volume of master, we'll just call master, or wait, no, I think it's master volume with a space. Master space volume, and then this. Now I'm second guessing myself. I should probably check. I think I put them at the top. Oh, it's no space. Okay, good thing I checked. So it's master volume, capital M, capital V, no space in the middle. For the music one, music volume, no space in the middle. And then for the bottom one, it's sound volume, no space in the middle. Same format. Everybody got that? Cool. So those are exposed. That's wonderful. I think we are done in there. Okay, so let's assign the mixer group. So now in order to have Unity recognize that a certain sound is part of this group, so when we change the volume of the group, we want it to actually adjust the sound that's being played. We have to tell it that this sound output corresponds to this group. So if we go to our game scene by hopping into here, into the game scene, the player, if you click on player, you'll see it has an audio source. An audio source in Unity is just a script that plays sound. And you'll see that it says output, and we have missing audio mixer group, or it'll say none, one of the two. So now we want to assign a group. In this case, we're going to assign it to the sound group for sound effects, since jumping is more of a sound effect than it is music. Go ahead and click on that. And then, so now if we change the sound mixer group volume, it will automatically adjust the volume for this audio source as well, which is really nice. We're going to do the same thing with the music object. So if you click on the music object, all it has is an audio source. We'll do the same thing. We'll assign that group to music. So now if we change the music volume, it will change this output as well. I hit Control S to save. Okay, so now let's actually create the UI part of this. So that's a general rundown of how to make a sound system. Now we'll actually do the input so the player can change it if they'd like. That will be on the main menu, so we'll switch back to the main menu scene by double-clicking that. And then you can see in the scene here, there's this little gray box in the bottom right, which I already added into here. Basically, I did the same thing as the pause menu. I have a vertical layout group. It has an object inside of there. You can add as many sliders as you want. If you're doing like settings or something, this is nice because you might add or remove settings in the future. So instead of you manually changing the spacing and having to do all that every time you want to add a new setting, you can just add it to this vertical layout group. It'll automatically space it out for you all nice. I already did that because we already did that with the pause menu, so you don't have to do that again. But we will add the slider to it at least, so I can show you that part. So you'll see in here it says audio panel. We have this text, audio, and then we have items, which is just the vertical layout group. And then there's this slider template that I put in here. It already has the text, which we can change. Right now it just takes up like half the width. And then we'll add a slider to the other half. So let's just add the slider to the template. Go ahead and right-click on slider template and do UI and then slider. And you'll see this one doesn't say Text Mesh Pro, and that's because it doesn't have any text. It's just a slider. That's all fine and dandy. We can just leave that as slider for the name. Good enough. And we don't want it in the middle. I mean, you could leave it in the middle if you'd like. I'm going to shift it to the right. So I'm going to set the anchor to the right side. Or actually, I'm going to set it to stretch. So if you were to resize this, then the slider would automatically adjust its size. The text is a fixed width, so it will not scale with the width. Oops. Let's do this. I will set the right to 0. And then let's set the left to 200. Yeah. To 200. And then, like, if you wanted to, like, you can adjust the size of this, and you don't have to do this, but you can see how the slider will scale with the size, but the text stays constant. So if I make this skinnier or wider, the slider will automatically adjust. Okay. We got the slider, that's cool. Okay, so let's duplicate this slider template as we did with the buttons. Control D on all of them. And then you can rename them if you'd like. I'm going to call the first one master. Call the second one, I'm going to rename that one to music. And then I'm going to rename the last one sound. And then I'm also going to change the text on all of them, just like we had to do with the buttons, just so the player can see all of them and know what the sliders are. First one is master, second one was music and sound. Okay, and then now we get to link them to the main menu class, same way we did with the buttons. So it's pretty similar, except for this case it doesn't have an on-click function. This one, or event I should say, this one has an on-value changed. So this one will be called every time the slider is moved, every frame it's moved. So this is kind of nice for being able to, for instance, change the sound. This will, but it's a little different. So the button, it just calls that function. On value changed, you'll see how it says, it has parentheses and then it says single. What this means is it will pass in a floating number, a float. So we can use that to determine what position the slider is in. It'll give you a float from 0 to 1 as a percentage. So then we know what volume the sound should be, which is really nice. So on the main menu object, we'll have to do some crisscross here. Let's assign all of these things, and I'll explain what the script does in a second. First, it's asking for the audio mixer. So yeah, if you select this main menu object, and then down in the project, go ahead and find that mixer we created. If your mouse isn't dumb like mine, you should be able to just drag it in there. If you can't do that, you just click on this little dot and then hit the mixer. And then for the slider, they're all named the same. We will also drag those into here, maybe. Oh, you have to drag the actual slider object. So the master of music and sound, you have to drag those sliders. This is fun. Okay. Into there. Okay. So basically what this is doing is it's just giving the script a reference to that object, to the slider, because the script has to do two things. One, when the slider's value is changed, we want the slider to tell the script that the value changed so it can adjust the volume. But then at the beginning of the game, we want it to load those values. So we also need a way to have the script be able to tell the slider, hey, change your value. So it's kind of a back and forth communication that they have going, which is why we have to do this here. And then we also need to change the, or set an on value changed event as well. So let's do that. Go to the slider under the master one. Let's go hit the plus, just like we did with the button. And then for the object, we will drag in this main menu object. Change the function. It will be under main menu. And then this one is, so you see it in two different spots. And this kind of choked me up when I was doing it because I kind of forgot this was a thing. You'll see kind of in the middle bottom, it says on master volume changed float. And then you also see the same function at the top, on master volume changed. And you can see right above it how it's kind of grayed out, but it says dynamic float. And then below that it says static parameters. What this means is that if Unity detects that the function matches the type of event, so the event passes in a float, if Unity sees that, hey, this function takes in one float, it will dynamically, automatically pass that float in to this function that we have created. So we are going to click the top one, so it will automatically pass in that float. Just to show you what happens otherwise, if you click on the bottom one, it has this input down here, which is fine. You can pass in just a regular float, but it will constantly be 0. But if we hit the one at the top, it doesn't have that because it will automatically pass in the slider %. So let's do that for all of them. Go ahead and click on the music slider, hit plus, drag in the object. Brother. I'm having no luck. There. Oh, wait, that's not the right one. Okay. There. Instead of dragging, I'm just going to type it in. Plus, change the object, scene, main menu. I forgot to change the function on the last one. So the bottom one is on sound volume changed, and then this music one is on music volume changed. Got all those. Okay. So I believe those should all be linked up all nice. So let me show you the script and then I'll show you it working. So in the actual script, what it's doing, it's getting those references here. When the game starts, it'll call this update sound function. So I use the player prefs. If you don't know what player prefs are, Unity has a built-in saving and loading system, but this is like very bare bones. This is meant for settings mostly for the most part. You can use it in game jams for like a high score or something. But literally all it's doing is just taking this value and putting it in a text file somewhere. So if you want to do a high score, probably not recommended because a player could just go edit their high score to be like 5 million or something. But for settings, that doesn't matter because it's just a setting. So if you want to change the volume, we'll use player prefs. You can do, yeah.
What are you supposed to use instead of player pref?
Generally speaking, you'd probably use something that C# allows, not through Unity. So C# has ways of writing to files, and you'd probably encrypt it of some sort. You'd have to do a little bit more research. The easiest way to encrypt something is to use a binary writer, which also isn't recommended sometimes because of security problems, but that at least makes it so it's not human readable, because it would just be a bunch of random garbage if they open the file. Whereas in this case, they can literally open it. It says sound equals 5 or high score equals 10, and they could just change that. So yeah, plus you could probably Google like Unity how to save a high score or something. There might be some stuff you can find. So yeah, no problem. So yeah, this will get that from the player pref, so load that from the settings. This is just the name of it as in a constant. And And then with the audio mixer, it'll set the float, and since we set that to the same name, master volume, it will set the volume. So there is a trick, and I will show this GIF as an example. Because of how sound works, it's kind of goofy. If you know what logarithmic math is, if you've taken like any higher level math courses, you've probably heard of that. Sound is a little weird. It is not linear. So if we were to take that slider and just set it to 0 to -80, which -80 is like basically silent, you would notice when you get the slider closer to the bottom, you would notice a sudden drop off of sound. So in order to fix that, we have to do a little bit of math that will adjust it for us so that when you are sliding that slider up and down, it sounds to your ear like it is linear, like it is going from like slowly quieter. So, and we do that by taking the log 10 of the volume and multiplying it by 20. So this will get it from 0 to negative whatever it is. And then that 20 will scale it so it goes from 0 to -80. And so we have to pass that in. I also did a math clamp here, and this is just to get it. If you do a 0, it will break the volume. Because I don't think you can log 0 or something like that. So I just clamped in between 0, 0, 0, 1, a really small value, and 1, which is basically silent. You won't hear the difference. So it'll pass in that value, set the audio mixer volume, which is all nice, and then this part will set all of the sliders automatically. And then when each thing is called, it will update those settings, it will save it, and then it will call that function again. So let's see it in action. Which there's no sound on the main menu, but if we hit start, you can hear the sound. Then if we go back to here and I change the master volume all the way down to like 0 and hit start again, everything's completely silent. But if I wanted to adjust just one of them, like if the music is too loud, I can change this to like 50%. But the master volume has control over both. So now if you were to visualize, if you will, if you change the master volume to 50%, then the music is actually at like 25 and the sound is actually at like 50. So if I play again, everything's even quieter, but the sound is still louder than the music. So. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to everybody? I actually had one more thing. I was going to do a hit point bar, but honestly, it's pretty simple in comparison to these two things. And because these took so long, I'm probably just going to wrap it up now. But, well, anyways, a couple more announcements for those of you that missed the beginning. Next week, we are going to have a speaker. His name is Ben. He graduated from Iowa State in 2020. He's been doing game development pretty much, I think, full time since then. He's been working at a company. He's also done stuff in his free time. So he's had some success. And we're going to do a Discord call with him. We'll still be in the room. You're welcome to join from Discord somewhere else. But it'll be a lot easier to ask questions and participate in like conversation and stuff if you want to hang out here. So that's what we'll do next week. Last call, if you want to pay for a hat or last-minute T-shirts, please talk to Jimmy after the meeting. But without further ado, go forth, make games, and be awesome.